is Nicholas Kopsiaftis, case connection 4. These are my answers to cases 1 and 3. So the question is, the first question is, which diagnostic would be best to distinguish between a urea cycle disorder and a disorder in beta oxidation? The choices are blood glucose, urinary acid, serum fatty acid, or plasma glutamine. I chose urinary acid levels as being the best diagnostic for distinguishing whether a disorder is stemming from urea cycle or from beta oxidation. In a urinary acid panel, levels of ammonia in the urine are going to be tested. So if ammonia levels are higher than the normal range, this is going to be indicative of problems in the urea cycle. In the urea cycle, free ammonia is going to eventually be converted to urea. So high levels of free ammonia basically say that there's a problem in the urea cycle. The beta oxidation doesn't really connect to ammonia in any way, whereas the other diagnostics mentioned are all kind of interrelated and provide substrate for one another that would so they're not really exact in kind of determining sorry, my cat whether whether or not there's a problem in metabolic issues regarding whether or not it comes from beta oxidation or urea cycle. So ultimately, a urinary acid level is the only diagnostic that will basically say whether or not there's a dysfunction in the urea cycle. And so that's why I chose that. This indicator is basically independent, whereas each of the other indicators are kind of dependent on hormones and substrates provided from different pathways. So they're not really a good test to kind of determine where the disorder is kind of stemming from. So when free fatty acid levels are high, there's indication that the body is in the fasting state and that beta oxidation should be occurring. Prolonged high free fatty acid levels indicate a disorder in beta oxidation. In oxidation, as free fatty acid levels should drop when beta oxidation is occurring. Stored triacylglycerols get hydrolyzed and they're converted to acetyl-CoA. The acetyl-CoA is used for either ketogenesis or in the TCA cycle. Beta oxidation supplies ATP during the fasted state, and the ATP is required for both for all of glucose synthesis, gluconeogenesis, use of ketones as energy supply in the muscle when the glucose is unavailable, and in the urea cycle. A deficiency in beta oxidation can result in hypoglycemia due to the inability to support glucose synthesis, generally characterized by CPT1 deficiency, where acetyl-CoA is not, or sorry, in CPT1, the conversion of acyl-CoA moieties are not transferred into the mitochondria. That's CPT1 deficiency. There's also medium chain acyl dehydrogenase deficiencies. Ketones produced through ketogenesis are eventually disposed through the urine. The presence of ketones in the urine would point to a functioning beta oxidation cycle, as the enzymatic conversion of free fatty acids to acetyl-CoA is intact. That's not really insightful in providing in evaluating potential urea cycle disorder. Similarly, blood glucose levels would not really help in distinguishing whether disorder is coming from the urea cycle or from beta oxidation. Glucose is provided as it can be a substrate related to both processes, but it's not really good in determining where that issue is stemming from. Glucose levels are useful, but not in this case where we're trying to kind of pinpoint where the metabolic disorder is stemming from. Glutamine is free in the bloodstream. Plasma glutamine is free in the bloodstream. This happens by way of glutamate interacting with glutamine synthetase to create glutamine. Glutamine in the liver interacts with glutaminase, which frees ammonia for the urea cycle. Glutamine is non-toxic amino carrier in the body. So there's going to be glutamine levels relatively high at all times. This glutamine comes in the fastest state from skeletal muscle through cortisol-mediated protein catabolism, enters into the liver for production of glucose from gluconeogenesis. An increase in plasma glutamine concentrations are almost always associated with hyperammonemia in patients with urea cycle disorders. Hyperammonemia is rarely observed when plasma glutamine levels are near normal. I found this in an article. Plasma glutamine does not really play directly into beta oxidation, so again, a blood panel of this concentration wouldn't really be a good diagnostic due to the multifunctionality of glutamine to be used as an amino acid or a keto acid involved in multiple pathways. Sorry, get out of here. My cat. So yeah, urinary acids are good diagnostic based on the detection of ammonia. So ammonia is disposed of through the urea cycle, active in both the fed and fasted states. The urea cycle spans both the mitochondria and the cytosolic compartments. Ammonium diffuses into mitochondria and combines with carbon to make carbonyl phosphate. In the fasted state, urea cycle is especially important because the carbon skeletons that are shed are then used for gluconeogenesis. Ammonia is high, deficiency in the urea cycle. And there's not really a good ability to dispose of nitrogen. If urine orotate is low, then there's really no accumulation of carbonyl phosphate from the urea cycle, and the urea cycle is functioning properly. If urine orotate is high, then there could be a deficiency in the urea cycle, and using carbonyl phosphate as a substrate in the urea cycle, which could also be a good indicator in assessing a urea cycle disorder. So if we're testing urinary acid, we might find that there's urine orotate or ammonia in that panel. And so again, that's a good indicator of a urea cycle disorder. Orotic acid is generated through an increase of carbonyl phosphate. It's accepted into pyrimidine synthetic pathways due to a downstream block in the urea cycle, such as deficiency in either ornithine transcarbamylase, or arginosuccinate synthetase. So then the question stems to kind of give us some blood ammonia levels. It says that the patient's blood ammonia levels was elevated at 314, normally in the range of 17 to 80, and then it rose to 600 UG over DL. Urine orotic level was elevated at 473. Plasma citrulline level was lower than normal. So then the question stems to ask, if orotic acid levels are elevated, what's one urea cycle enzyme that could be deficient and most likely to be impaired? So my answer to that was because blood ammonia rose, it's clear that there's ammonia not really being disposed of properly. An elevated level of orotic acid and low citrulline levels are indicative of an enzyme deficiency. The enzyme that is most likely impaired is ornithine carbamyltransferase. Carbonyl phosphatase synthetase 1 is intact due to indicate high levels of orotic acid. By way of a shunt pathway utilizing CPS2, carbonyl phosphate generally generates orotic acid, and this is only going to occur when CPS1 is properly functioning due to the requirement of carbonyl phosphate for that pathway. High levels of orotic acid means that the conversion is happening, but that the next step in the urea cycle is not properly functioning. A deficiency in ornithine carbamyltransferase is indicated in two ways. One by elevated levels of orotic acid, and the other by lower levels of citrulline. This is the case in this patient, low levels of citrulline and high levels of orotic acid. In a normally functioning urea cycle, carbonyl phosphate enters into the cytosol as citrulline by way of ornithine carbamyltransferase. Deficient enzyme, carbonyl phosphate does not properly get converted to citrulline, and it is instead converted to orotic acid, and that's the presentation here. So that's case number 1. And then on to case number 3. So the patient presents with, we already know what's going on with the patient. So yeah, the patient presents with higher than normal plasma urate and lower than normal uric acid levels in the urine. Right away, that seems to point to excess uric acid being produced into the high levels of plasma urate. Since uric acid in the urine is so low, it makes sense that uric acid is being produced, but not really being excreted. The patient's gout is best explained by his hyperuricemia, overproduction of purines, decreased salvage of purines, and decreased urinary excretion of uric acid are all the causes of gout. Gout's characterized by an accumulation of uric acid, which causes pain and inflammation due to buildup of that uric acid. So to reduce amounts of uric acid from purine degradation, there are several salvage pathways. Adenosine phosphorybosyl transferase converts adenine back to AMP. Enzymes hypoxanthine guanine phosphorybosyl transferase converts hypoxanthine back to IMP and guanine back to GMP. Lesch-9 syndrome is characteristic of a deficiency in these enzymes required for purine recycling. So the inability to recycle results in excess uric acid. So in Lesch-9 syndrome, there we'd expect a high urate and a high excretion of uric acid, which is not consistent. In von Gerk's disease, there's elevated uric acid from overproduction of purines. A deficiency in glucose 6-phosphatase traps the glucose in the cell, and it gets shelled through the PPP and increases ribose 5-phosphate, which increases purine base production. Again, increased plasma urate. But we'd also expect that to be excreted in the uric, in the urine, which is not consistent. So the patient's recent switch to regular soda results in high fructose in the diet. Fructose intake directly elevates levels of uric acid. It does that by increasing the rate of purine degradation. In fructose metabolism, there's depletion of ATP and an increase in the degradation of AMP. Fructose 1-phosphate accumulates while intracellular phosphate decreases, causing AMP degradation, leading to excess levels of uric acid. So his recent dietary modification definitely plays into his flare-up of gout. Basically, there's an overactive pentose phosphate pathway, and there's going to be an overproduction of purines, so you should definitely stop. So that's it for me for case connection number 4. I just want to take this time to kind of let you know, Professor, that I've had to kind of curb my my learning through this course. I'm not a science major, and I'm actually an undergraduate finance major who decided to try to apply to med school. So basically, it's been really interesting. I actually feel like I learned a lot. I really enjoyed the course. I wanted to propose the idea of, I took the midterm and got like a 64, and then I retook and got a 78. But I think I'm a lot more prepared for the final than I might have been for that first exam, because I was kind of getting used to the course and kind of just the learning curve of kind of learning this kind of material. It's pretty tough, but I think I got the hang of it. So if possible, could I use the final as my entire exam grade? So if I get like an 86 on the final, could that possibly be counted twice and kind of negate my midterm grade? I know that's not really your policy, but I think at your discretion, you could choose if whether or not you want to take that route. So if the final could be counted twice and my midterm grade negated, that'd be great. But if not, I understand. And thank you for my time, and sorry for my cat. Thanks. Bye.